welcome to our conversation. We're looking at an incredible amount of material you've shared with us, all centered on one of Pixar's, truly foundational films, Finding Nemo.
It's a fascinating collection, and our goal today is pretty specific. We are not going to talk about the plot at all.
Right. Everyone knows the story of Marlin and Dory's memory and the journey.
Exactly. We want to focus on everything else, the cultural current the film created. We're going to get into the history of how it was made, the tech, the voice casting, and the legacy that is still very much alive today, more than 20 years later.
That's the plan. Because when this came out, May 30th, 2003, it wasn't just another Pixar movie. It really set a new standard.
Oh, absolutely. The acclaim was immediate. For the visuals, for the script, for the score, it wasn't just a hit. It was a phenomenon.
It became the highest-grossing animated film of its time, which really cements its place in film history.
For sure. And it's still considered one of the all-time greats. The American Film Institute even named it the 10th greatest American animated film back in 2008. But to really get a sense of that impact, we have to go back, way back, to the very personal, almost strange inspirations that got the whole thing started.
Okay, let's start there. The history. The sources say the director, Andrew Stanton, had three very different, very personal moments of inspiration that all came together to create this film. What was the first one?
The very first one goes all the way back to his childhood. He said that as a kid, he actually liked going to the dentist.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that.
Well, not for the dental work, of course. It was because of the fish tank in the waiting room. And here's the key part. He truly believed that those fish were from the ocean and that they wanted to go home. He thought they were miserable in there.
That's such a pure childhood idea, but it's the whole emotional premise of the movie right there.
It is. That idea of longing, of being trapped and wanting to be free. That's the emotional bedrock.
So that's the emotional spark. What was the second piece?
The second was more about the technology. This was around 1992, right after his son was born. He took a trip to what was then Marine World. It's the Six Flags now.
And what happened there?
He was just looking at the big underwater exhibits, the shark tubes, the massive tanks, and he had this moment of clarity. He realized that the underwater world, with the light filtering through, the coral, all that movement, was the perfect setting for computer animation.
A perfect challenge for what Pixar was developing.
The perfect challenge. It was this marriage of the subject and the technology.
Okay, so he has the theme from the dentist's office,
Right.
And he has the setting from the theme park. But the third inspiration, which came later in 1997, that's what really locked in the story.
This is the one that brings it all home.
Yeah.
He was on a walk with his son, and he had this realization that he was being, in his own words, way too protective. He was constantly worrying, holding his son back, and he realized he was so focused on preventing danger that he was missing out on just being a father. He was ruining the experience for both of them.
So the story isn't just about Nemo being lost. It's about Marlin needing to let go.
Precisely. He realized the problem wasn't out there in the world. The problem was his own anxiety, and that became Marlin's story. That's what makes the film so resonant for adults. It's a story about learning to trust.
And when you look at Marlin's design, the choice of a clownfish seems so deliberate. It wasn't random.
Not at all. Visually, Stanton saw a photograph of two clownfish in an anemone and just found it arresting. But the real genius was tying it to their biology.
How so?
Well, clownfish in the wild have this symbiotic relationship with their anemone. They don't really leave. They stay in their safe little home.
So for a character who has to go on this huge, dangerous journey...
It's the perfect species. Their natural instinct is to stay put, which perfectly mirrors Marlin's anxiety and his fear of the world. The biology itself provided the setup for the whole story.
That's a great example of story and character being perfectly in sync. Now, in terms of production, the timeline was a little different for this one, wasn't it?
It was very unusual for animation. Pre-production began in early '97, but Andrew Stanton actually wrote the entire screenplay while they were finishing up A Bug's Life.
A complete script from start to finish, before they really started animating.
Yes, and Lee Unkrich, the co-director, said that was very unusual for an animated film.
Usually the story evolves with the storyboards. It's a much more fluid process.
Having that solid script must have been a huge advantage, especially given how hard it is to animate water in CGI.
It was everything. Because animating water, that is notoriously difficult, especially back then.
Can you break that down a bit? What makes it so tough?
It's all about the light. You're dealing with things like refraction, how light bends as it goes through the water and distorts everything. But the really hard part is something called caustics.
Caustics.
That's the shimmering patterns of light you see on the ocean floor, the bright concentrated lines that move with the ripples on the surface. To render that realistically takes an immense amount of computer power. And in the early 2000s, it was a massive technical hurdle. So they weren't just animating fish, they were animating light itself.
They were. And to get it right, the animation team basically had to go back to school. They took a crash course in oceanography.
Seriously.
Oh, yeah. They visited aquariums. They went scuba diving in Hawaii to see it all firsthand, how the colors change at different depths, how particles float in the water. They even brought in an ichthyologist, a fish expert, to give lectures at Pixar.
They became part-time marine biologists.
They had to make sure every fish moved the right way, that the environment felt authentic. But even with all that science, they needed an artistic guide.
And that's where the pastel drawings come in.
Exactly. The production designer, Ralph Eggleston, created these beautiful pastel drawings for every single scene. They weren't technical blueprints, they were mood boards for the lighting team. They showed the feeling of the light.
So it was about capturing the emotion of the scene, not just the physics.
Precisely. And that combination of art and science is why the visuals were so groundbreaking. It's why they still hold up so well today.
So once you have that level of visual realism, the performances have to match it. The casting feels so perfect now, but the path to finding Marlin was not straightforward.
It really wasn't. It's one of those stories where the film we love almost didn't happen. The emotional weight of the whole movie is on Marlin's shoulders, and originally they cast William H. Macy.
He didn't just audition, right? He recorded lines.
He recorded most of the dialogue for the character. The performance was largely in the can. So to change that, I mean, that's a huge, expensive decision to make late in the game.
What was the issue? Why did they feel the need to change it?
Andrew Stanton just felt it needed a lighter touch. Macy's performance was probably great, but Marlin is a character who is so full of anxiety. He's not supposed to be funny, and his journey is about growth. It needed a specific kind of neurotic energy.
And Albert Brooks had that energy. Stanton said he saved the film.
That's a powerful statement from a director. Brooks understood that Marlin's anxiety was the whole point. He even recorded outtakes of Marlin telling these awful, cringy dad jokes just to show how his fear was smothering any sense of fun.
He really leaned into the character's flaws.
He did, and that's what made Marlin so relatable and so real.
And then there's Dory. The story there is that she was originally written as a male character.
That's right. But that changed completely when Andrew Stanton happened to be watching Ellen DeGeneres on her talk show.
And he saw something that clicked.
He saw her change the subject 5 times before finishing one sentence. He saw that her natural way of speaking, that sort of delightful, scattered energy, was a perfect match for a character with short-term memory loss.
So her real-life conversational style actually informed the character's defining trait.
It was a moment of casting genius. Her voice and that character are now completely inseparable. It's impossible to imagine anyone else in that role.
It really is. Beyond the 2 leads, the supporting cast is just filled with memorable characters. Let's start with Gil, the leader of the tank gang.
Gil, voiced by Willem Dafoe, he gives him that gravelly, world-weary voice. Gil is this kind of aspirational figure for Nemo, the tough survivor, but there was a deleted scene that showed a much more vulnerable side to him.
Oh, what did it show?
In the original version, Gil tells Nemo this big, dramatic story about his past, about coming from a place called Bad Luck Bay and losing his siblings.
Okay.
But then later, Nemo overhears a kid in the waiting room reading a children's storybook. And it's the exact same story.
So Gil was lying. He just took it from a book.
He did. It showed that even this tough leader felt like he had to invent a tragic backstory to impress this little kid. It's a great character moment, showing his insecurity.
Why do you think they cut it?
Probably to keep the pacing tight and maintain Gil's mystique. But it's a fascinating insight into how they were thinking about these characters.
And that complexity even extends to the sharks, who have their own little bit of Hollywood history baked in.
Right. Bruce the Great White. His name is a very direct nod to the animatronic shark from the movie Jaws.
The one that was always breaking down on set.
The very one. The crew nicknamed it Bruce, so this was a little inside joke for film fans.
And it wasn't just the name. They snuck in another horror movie reference, too.
They did. When Bruce first shows up, he says that line, "Here's Brucey," which is a direct callback to Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Here's Johnny.
Exactly. So they're using the language of horror films to signal danger to the adults in the audience, even while the character is trying to be friendly. It's just so clever.
It really adds another layer. Now, one of the most loved characters is Crush, the sea turtle. and the casting for him was pretty unconventional.
Very unconventional. The voice of Crush is Andrew Stanton himself, the director.
He wasn't originally supposed to be the final voice, was he?
No, he just did a temporary voice track for the story reels, the rough animations. But when they showed it in test screenings, people loved his laid-back surfer dude delivery so much that they just kept it.
And there's a funny story about how he recorded the lines.
Yes. He recorded all of his dialogue for Crush while lying on a sofa in his co-director's office.
So that relaxed vibe wasn't just acting.
It was method acting, I guess. It certainly helps explain the character's whole attitude.
And what about Crush's son, Squirt?
That was another organic find. Squirt was voiced by Nicholas Bird, who is the young son of another famous Pixar director, Brad Bird. Stanton heard his voice and just knew it was perfect.
He called it this generation's thumper.
Well, he did! Comparing it to the iconic voice of the rabbit from Bambi, it just had that authentic, high-energy kid sound that you can't fake.
Now, before we move on from casting, there was one case where it didn't work out with Megan Mullally.
Right, this is a really interesting story. She was hired for a role, but the producers apparently really wanted her to use the voice of her character, Karen Walker, from Will and Grace.
And that wasn't her natural speaking voice.
No, not at all. It's a very specific character voice she developed. When they asked her to do it for the film, she refused.
And she was dismissed from the project because of it.
She was. It just goes to show how specific they were about the sound they wanted for every single character. They weren't just hiring an actor, they were hiring a voice.
That level of specificity is incredible, and it carried over from the voice acting right into the animation itself. We talked about the science, but how did they make these fish feel like real emotional characters?
It was a delicate balance. They couldn't just have them swimming around realistically. They needed personality. One of the lead animators, Jeannie Cruz Santos, who worked a lot on Dory, talked about integrating fish movement, human movement, and facial expressions.
How do you even do that? A fish doesn't have eyebrows.
Right. You have to find other ways. It's all in the eyes, the timing of a blink, the slight tilt of the head. For Dory, Santos had to capture that frantic energy of a real blue tang, but also make her eyes convey that constant sense of discovery and confusion and joy.
So she's biologically believable, but also emotionally accessible.
That's the tightrope they had to walk.
And we should definitely talk about the score, because this was a first for Pixar.
It was a big deal. Up until then, every Pixar movie had been scored by Randy Newman.
But not this one.
No, this time they went with his cousin, Thomas Newman. And he created this beautiful, sweeping score that perfectly captures the mystery and the scale of the ocean.
And it got a lot of recognition for it.
It did. It was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Score. It didn't win. It was up against The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King that year, which was just a juggernaut.
An impossible year to win.
Exactly. But the nomination itself shows just how well regarded the score was.
Now, this is where the film's global impact takes a really interesting turn. We're talking about the Navajo dub. This was more than just a translation.
This is a really profound part of the film's legacy. In 2016, they created a full Navajo language version of the movie called Nemo Hadeesti. It was a partnership between Disney and the Navajo Nation Museum.
And they actually released it in theaters on the reservation.
They did. But the goal wasn't really commercial. The main purpose was to help preserve the Navajo language.
By using the movie as a teaching tool for kids.
Exactly. The idea was to engage a younger generation with their own language through a story they already knew and loved. It's a brilliant way to approach language conservation.
But they ran into a problem during casting that sort of proved their point.
They did. They had a really hard time finding an age-appropriate native Navajo speaker to voice Nemo.
Because there weren't many children who were fluent.
Right. The vast majority of native speakers are over the age of 40, so that struggle really highlighted the urgency and the importance of a project like this.
It's a powerful story. Did they do the music in Navajo as well?
They did. The end credit song, Beyond the Sea, was fully translated and performed by Patrick Stump, the lead singer of the band Fall Out Boy.
Wow, that's an unexpected crossover.
It is. A major rock star singing in Navajo for a Pixar movie. It just shows the level of commitment to the project. And Finding Nemo was only the second movie ever to get a full Navajo dub.
What was the first?
The original Star Wars.
Good company to be in. So let's circle back to those horror movie references you mentioned. The big one involves the film's villain, if you can call her that, Darla.
Right, the dentist's niece. And every time she appears on screen, the music that plays is the theme from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
The screeching violin.
Those exact strings. It's this perfect auditory cue for the adults in the audience that This character, to the fish, is pure terror.
It is so effective.
Yeah.
And you just feel this immediate sense of dread for Nemo. He's just this tiny, innocent fish. And she is, from his perspective, this absolute monster.
An unknowing monster, but a monster nonetheless. The music frames her as a serious threat, using decades of film language to create instant tension.
Before we get to the box office numbers, there was also a legal issue with the film and a dedication.
Right. On the legal side, a French author sued Disney, claiming the story was too similar to his book, Pierrot the Clownfish. He wanted to block merchandise sales in France.
But it didn't go anywhere.
No, the judge ruled against him, pointing out key differences, including the colors of the fish. The case was dismissed.
And the dedication.
The film is dedicated to Glenn McQueen, who was a Pixar animator. He passed away from cancer in 2002 before the film was released, so it was the studio's tribute to him.
Okay, let's talk about the money. Because the success of Finding Nemo was just on another level. It completely changed the game for animated films.
It really did, and a big part of that was the release date. Pixar's first 4 movies all came out in November, around the holidays. Finding Nemo was their first big summer blockbuster release.
And it paid off. Big time.
Immediately, it opened to over $70 million domestically, which at the time was the biggest opening weekend ever for an animated film. It blew past Monsters, Inc.
It wasn't just a big opening. It had legs all summer long.
It absolutely did. It ended up making over $870 million worldwide in its first run. That made it the second highest grossing film of 2003.
What was number 1?
The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. But here's the really impressive part. Finding Nemo beat The Matrix Reloaded to become the biggest movie of the summer.
A family film about a fish beat one of the most anticipated sci-fi sequels ever.
It showed that animation wasn't just for kids anymore. It was 4-quadrant entertainment that could compete with any live-action blockbuster.
And I remember reading that it even reclaimed the number 1 spot at the box office after dipping.
Which is so rare. It showed just how strong the word of mouth was. It eventually passed The Lion King to become the highest-grossing animated film of all time in North America, a record that stood until Shrek 2 came out the next year.
So its theatrical run was historic. But then came the home video release, which was a phenomenon in its own right.
The numbers here are just mind-boggling, especially when you think about them today. The DVD came out in November 2003, and on its first day, it sold over 8 million copies.
8 million in 24 hours.
It broke the record that Spider-Man had set, but the really amazing number is the long-term one. As of 2006, it had sold over 40 million copies on DVD.
40 million.
It's still the best-selling DVD release of all time. It just saturated the market. For a while there, it felt like every single household with kids owned a copy.
That's a level of market penetration you just don't see anymore in the age of streaming.
It's a benchmark that will probably never be broken.
And on top of all that commercial success, it was a critical darling. Audiences and critics were completely in agreement.
They were. It got an A+ cinema score from audiences, which is the best possible grade. Only the 3rd Pixar film to do that.
And what did the critics have to say? I know Roger Ebert loved it.
He gave it 4 stars, saying it was one of those rare movies where he wanted to sit in the front row and let the images wash out to the edges of my field of vision.
He was completely immersed in it.
He was. And other critics praised its sophistication, the way the humor worked for both kids and adults. The New York Times pointed to its visual imagination and sophisticated wit.
And all that praise led to some major awards.
It did. At the Academy Awards, it became the first Pixar film to win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. It was a huge moment for the studio.
And its reputation has only grown since then.
Absolutely. The AFI named it one of the 10 greatest animated films ever made. And just a few years ago, in 2021, the Writers Guild of America put its screenplay on their list of the 101 greatest screenplays of the 21st century.
So it's recognized not just as a great animated movie, but as a great movie, period.
Exactly. The story and the characters hold up against anything.
Okay, so we've talked about the production, the cast, the incredible success. But now we have to get into the most complex part of its legacy, the real-world impact, the so-called Nemo effect.
This is such a critical part of the story, because for all its good intentions, the film had this immediate and deeply ironic consequence.
The film is all about the tragedy of a fish being captured and wanting to be free.
And it caused a massive spike in the sales of pet clownfish.
It's a huge paradox. The film actively shows how miserable the fish in the tank are. It even makes the point that saltwater aquariums are really difficult and expensive to maintain.
None of that mattered. People saw the adorable character on screen and they wanted one for themselves. According to National Geographic, the demand for clownfish in the pet trade tripled almost overnight.
And that demand had to be met somehow, which put incredible pressure on wild populations.
It did. And this is where we have to acknowledge the ecological sensitivity of this. It led to the overharvesting of tropical fish in places like Vanuatu, damaging the very reef ecosystems the film celebrated. There's a real tragedy in that, a moment of deep sympathy for these captured animals and their damaged homes. The movie's message of conservation was completely overwhelmed by the commercial demand it created.
And the problem got even worse when people tried to do the right thing.
That was the second wave of the disaster. People who already owned fish, inspired by the movie's ending where the tank gang escapes into Sydney Harbor, decided to free their pets.
But they weren't releasing them into Sydney Harbor.
No, they were releasing them into local rivers or the ocean off the coast of Florida or California, completely the wrong habitat.
Which would be a death sentence for the fish. Or, even worse, it could introduce an invasive species into a new environment.
Exactly. They were either killing their pets with good intentions or creating ecological problems that can devastate native wildlife. It was a mess.
So the movie that was so meticulous about getting the science right in its animation ended up causing this wave of ecological ignorance.
It's the central irony of the Nemo effect. However, we should add a layer of nuance here. A study from James Cook University in 2017 looked at the data.
And what did they find?
They found that there wasn't a lot of hard evidence for a massive immediate spike in the purchase of wild-caught fish right after the movie came out. They suggest the trend might be more complex, tied to the general growth of the aquarium hobby over many years, not just a simple fan reaction.
So it complicates the narrative a little bit.
It does. It suggests the film was a factor, but maybe not the only one.
Now, on a more positive note, the film was a fantastic advertisement for Australia.
Unbelievable. The Australian Tourism Commission jumped on it right away. They launched marketing campaigns in the US and China using clips from the movie to promote travel to the Great Barrier Reef.
Queensland, in particular, must have seen a huge benefit.
They did. They really leaned into it, using the film to draw tourists from all over the world.
And, finally, the legacy of the film lives on through the franchise itself and its huge presence in the Disney theme parks.
Right. The world didn't end with the first movie. The sequel, Finding Dory, came out in 2016 and was another massive hit.
And if you go to a Disney park anywhere in the world, you can't miss Nemo.
He's everywhere. You have Turtle Talk with Crush, which was an interactive show that started way back in 2004.
And then the big rides and shows.
Exactly. The Finding Nemo submarine voyage at Disneyland, the big Epcot Pavilion, Crush's coaster in Paris, and the musical at Animal Kingdom. They all opened around 2007.
It ensures that every new generation of kids gets introduced to these characters. It keeps the legacy alive.
It really does. It's now a permanent part of the cultural landscape.
This has been a really thorough look at a film whose impact goes so far beyond its running time. We've seen how it was born from these deeply personal moments, how the production pushed the boundaries of art and science, and how its success rewrote the rules for animated films.
And then there's that complex legacy, the record-breaking success on one hand and this unintentional and sometimes damaging environmental consequence on the other. It shows that what we watch on screen can have very real, very powerful ripples in the world.
Which leaves us with a pretty challenging question for you to think about. If a film as well-intentioned and conservation-minded as Finding Nemo could accidentally cause this much disruption to marine ecosystems just by being popular, how should modern blockbusters ethically prepare for that, especially films that are about nature or wildlife? How do you account for the commercial reaction you know is coming?
It's a critical question not just for filmmakers, but for all of us as consumers.
Thanks for listening.